What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Restoration Rundown Podcast, the podcast that's dedicated to you, the restoration business owner. My name is Ben Riccardi from Ironclad Restoration Marketing, and I'm the author of the No BS Guide to Internet Marketing for Restoration Contractors. Now, the Restoration Rundown is your source for everything related to managing and owning your restoration business, from bringing on special guests and sharing success stories to taking deep dives with our team here at Ironclad Restoration Marketing into all of the online channels that you need to be tapping into to get visibility for your restoration business and get more leads from the internet. We've got you covered. So buckle up and get ready for the rundown. All right, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Restoration Rundown. We are very excited. I'm very excited. I don't know if you're very excited for today's guest. It's somebody that I think most of you know, unless you run your restoration business out of a cave somewhere in northern Alaska. You may be a little bit out of touch here, but he is somebody that's been involved in the industry since a child. And I relate to that a lot because I have a site development company, and that's kind of what I was doing since I was a kid, running heavy equipment and doing those things with my dad. And, you know, here we are running a nice size site development company, but it pales in comparison to this gentleman and his impact in the restoration world. So he's the president and chief acquisition officer at ATI Restoration, which is one of the world's largest family-owned restoration businesses. He's dedicated to the advocacy, education, and best practices within this industry. I mean, this guy is involved, has hands in everything. And I'm going to let him talk about this a little bit, but a big kudos and shout out to him because he just recently was elected at this year's RIA as the new president of the Restoration Industry Association, or as we all commonly know it, the RIA. So before I inflate this a little bit anymore, I want to welcome and have you guys join me in welcoming Mr. Jeff Moore to the Restoration Rundown podcast. Jeff, how are we doing today?
Doing great. How's it going? Thanks for having me, Ben.
It's good, man. I'm glad we can finally connect. I think we had like 75 emails back and forth trying to pick a time. And I know you're a busy guy, and I think everybody appreciates your time here and all the time you spend. I got a chance to chat with you just a little bit by the cigar rollers over at the industry party at RIA this year. But as usual, I'm pulled in 100 different directions, as I'm sure you are too. So I wanted to welcome you on the show and thank you once again for giving us your time.
Of course. Thanks for helping restorers.
So I don't know if you heard in the beginning, I kind of said there's a lot of people probably know who you are, whether it's just, the 30,000 square foot view guys that know ATI Restoration or no, but the people that live in Nome, Alaska in a cave that are in this industry and don't know who you are, don't know who ATI is, or maybe even don't know RIA. Could you just give us a few minutes on who you are, your background? I think your bio was really cool to read because you've been in this industry since a kid. This is a family run business. So give the listeners a little bit of the background of where you come from, how you fit into the industry, and kind of fast forward to where we're at today.
Sure. So I'm a second generation restorer. I work with both my brothers. My dad's started ATI back in 1989. We are the largest family owned and run restoration business. When I started in the business, we're doing $12, $13 million, I think 2 or 3 locations. Fast forward to today, 76 locations across the U.S., huge scale. We've just been blessed beyond belief. And I get to work with my 2 brothers, my best friends, and my dad. At one point, I met my wife through work. So
Wow.
A funny story. So when I asked her to marry me, I said, I work with enough family members. So you can keep the job or you can actually say yes and marry me. But I'm not working with my wife and my brothers and my dad. It's already too much. So it's been a fun ride. Dad grew up in the business. So he actually worked for BMS Cat back in the days and the family that started that. So Dad's been in restoration literally since high school. And when you say I was born into it, I literally was born into it. I think I've had 2 jobs. Neither of those jobs lasted 3 weeks. And besides that, this is the only thing I've ever done. So literally from working in the field, swinging a hammer, to sucking up water on floods when I was 16 years old on the weekends, to where I am today. And recently took over as the president of the RIA, which is the largest and only trade association for restorers. We've got chapters in the US, Canada, and Australia. We've got just shy of 2,000 members, several 100,000 employees across those, and got about a spending power of about $40 billion. So excited to represent the industry, broadly speaking, in my new role.
You hear that, cave dwellers? The RIA. Come on, you got to get involved. And I appreciate that background, and it resonates with me a lot because I own a construction company that's outside of this. We're in commercial heavy civil site, and that's how I started. I was too young to start at your age, probably you would. It wasn't per se a family business. I worked for my dad as soon as I possibly could. So I've had a couple different jobs here and there, but yeah, I started off a hillman laying pipe, and you really get an intimate knowledge of the ins and outs. And actually it's quite rare, one, to have a family run business this long, second generation. That's you're an outlier, I think. ATI is. But having somebody that's at the top of the company that has been through every step and then achieved the success is huge. So I'm sure your processes and your systems and a lot of the things we talk about on this podcast that people need to do, the guys that are either just starting out or they find themselves stuck at that like $3 to $7 million revenue range and are trying to figure out how to take those next steps. Again, we preach all the time to look at people like you as a mentor or somebody to look up to. And I know you're always open with your information and knowledge, and being part of RIA is a big part of that. So I implore all of our listeners always to join these associations, whether they're the regional ones or the national ones like RIA, because it only help your business. You're dealing with people that have been there and done that.
I learn from restorers every day. It's amazing. It doesn't matter what size you are. People come up to me and ask me like, you've got it figured out, or your ops has got to be the best in the industry. We're still all restorers figuring things out. You're never happy. If you're a good business owner, you're never happy with where you're at. And if you're not learning, then you're dying.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And if you remember, you can't be afraid to make mistakes. You can't sacrifice learning something or asking a question to make a mistake, because we're all making them every day, and they're not learning, you're dying. If you're not making mistakes, you're probably still laying in bed in most cases. And luckily when you're laying in bed, those mistakes are usually undoable because you're dreaming. So I want to talk a little bit about ATI. So one of the things we do, and our listeners will know this, is, we're really pushing to help people scale their businesses. Whether that's just through, how to get more leads from the internet, which is what my background is in as far as our agency here, how to get that visibility online. But we talk a lot about systems and processes and really accountability and really structuring the companies well, without going crazy into this, because I know we only have a limited amount of time and there's a lot of things I want to cover. Can you talk to ATI's success and what you think have been the biggest drivers to get you guys from, I think it was the 90s in your biography, to where you guys are now, which is like globally one of the largest family-run restoration businesses?
Yeah, so I'll probably take you back, because I think where we're at now, very different for your typical independent restorer. So Dad's strategy was pretty simple. Hire good people. And I don't know that that's really changed till today, but I want to say our first 5 or 6 locations, they were all friends of Dad. They were people he had worked at before. And then I mentioned he came out of the BMS Cat family. Not the literally family, but the business itself. And he had people he had worked with along the way. And so his reason for expansion was it's a necessary service. The reality is someone needs our service in every county and every zip code across the country. So as long as you have good people, a good process, and a good system, you can be successful. And so I would say the first 5 or 6 locations were, it's not that they didn't have their hiccups, but it was certainly easier knowing you've got someone that you trust, someone that you can rely on, someone that may not be an owner, but someone that you've known for 10 or 15 years is a lot easier to trust and to expand, whether it's into another county that's an hour away or another state that may be a Southwest flight away. And so that was the early success, was really people and really empowering them to be, even on my early days working for Dad, I felt like I was like the CEO of my own business. Like he gave us the wings. We had the name, we had some branding, we had some marketing, but we didn't have a lot of that. A lot of it was, putting us, really the CEOs of the business, out in the marketplace. At the end of the day, you're only as succesful as your brand and really the people you know and that your staff knows. And so to the extent that you can be the brand, that is the best route to generate new revenue, whether it's, volunteering an association, depending on where you want to get your business, but you want to be the face of the organization. And if you're leading from behind a desk, you're now dependent on employees. And guess what? Employees leave. You don't. So to the extent that you are the face of the organization, you're going to have longevity. You'll have loyalty. that will surpass anyone working in the organization. And so I would say phase one was really loyalty, people that Dad knew. And then I would say phase two was going into new markets, hiring people in those markets. And I would say our success was not very good. Like I wouldn't make that bet today. And I would say it was less than 50-50. There was an office that took us 10 years to make a buck.
Oh, yeah.
Literally $1. And it took us 10 years. I'm glad we did it. I learned a lot from it. But after that, we got a lot more strategic. And so we went to Denver, Colorado. Our closest office was Chicago, Arizona. And we went to the market for 12 months. And we would spend a week out of the month visiting with customers, meeting with people like John Don's or Ramsco, Baytex's, the suppliers, the dry cleaners, like who's in the market, who's a good estimator, who's a good salesperson, who can give me business. And we probably spent $100,000. And not that you need to do it at that size and scale, but believe it or not, we generated several $1 million in revenue the first 12 months without a brick and mortar. We subcontracted all of our work out to another restorer. And our first full year in business, we did $10 million in revenue.
Wow.
By planning our flag in advance, planning, strategizing. We knew who we were going to hire before we opened up. We figured out where we wanted our office to be. But I would just encourage people, if you're looking to expand, like the further you get away from home, the harder it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, from 100 different angles. So it sounds like you guys, the culture that you've established over these however many years this has just been something that's been evolved into where you're at now. I think culture is a huge part of business. People don't typically think about that, because you have restorers, they're great technicians, and then they want to go off on their own, and then they just bury their head in the sand in the day-to-day, and they kind of allow other things to just kind of happen without setting these precedences. But I've seen a common theme here with building systems, and there's some people that build systems on the fly. It sounds like a lot of this stuff, you guys taken 10 years to make a profit on the one location. I'm sure that if you did that now, that timeline would be drastically reduced, in some senses, or you might not have stuck through it in the first place. But we speak to the importance of those systems and really just sticking to those processes with where you're at now versus that.
100%. I mean, you got to, at the end of the day, you have to have the process, you got to have the systems, but most importantly, you got to have the people. If you don't have the right people, you can have the best processes. You can be the best operator in the world, but if you don't have the personality, people don't like working with you.
Yeah.
You don't lead people. I'd rather have the opposite. I'd rather have a great leader who's not a good process person, who doesn't understand, because you can get through all of that. But at the end of the day, you want to work with people you like. And if you're not a good leader, you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with that, hands down. I've done a lot of content, and it's part of the book I'm just about to release, the secret new super secret book. I'll send you a copy of it to take a look at before everybody else to get your blessing on it. But no, I appreciate that background, and really we're speaking to a wide variety of audiences. I think everybody will be able to get a little bit of something out of there because they're all in different stages of that process in most cases. And you're either in that stage or you're just going to curl up and spin your wheels with one truck on the road, and you're just going to be happy doing it that way forever until that just doesn't work anymore. So you've kind of got to adapt a little bit. So fast forward to today, you're in charge of the acquisitions of ATI. How long have you been involved in that aspect of ATI? And can you talk a little bit about that and what you guys are dealing with right now?
Yeah, so we brought in private equity, brought in outside capital. So we've got investors in the business. That happened basically during COVID. So we're about 4 to 5 years in. And again, there's no strategy to move me into acquisitions. I didn't know what acquisitions was. I didn't grow up in acquisitions and restoration. I didn't study it in school. I remember when we sold our business or sold part of it. I remember bankers asking me about EBITDA, and now I know what it is. And I could spell it, but I remember my dad and brothers and I had to Google it after we met with like 7 bankers and a couple private equity groups. And so yeah, that's been interesting. I was a former RIA board member about 10 years ago, and so I've had a lot of relationships in the industry. When I say industry, I'm talking probably more on the competitive side, the TPA side, the vendors, suppliers. And so it was a natural fit for me to kind of move into this, having a bunch of relationships with restorers all over the country, having gone through advanced certifications with RIA and IICRC. I did a lot of training along the way. So met a lot of great folks.
Yeah, that's great. And we've had a couple brokers on. We talk to them about what it takes and what they're looking for. And really, we try to bring everything home to the digital marketing aspect, because that's what I can speak about intelligently enough to get by. And a lot of them have their own things they're looking for, right? There's certain things that make businesses more attractive than others, but we're speaking to brokers. Now we're talking to somebody that's actually out there that's in charge of doing this and buying up these businesses. So can you give the people out there that are maybe thinking about that exit strategy a few of the things that you guys are looking for when it comes to acquiring another business in another territory?
Yeah, so I think the first thing goes back to same as my business is with ATI is people. So at the end of the day, I would say 60% of the businesses we've acquired or looking at, you've got an owner who's either looking to exit in a couple of years. And so in that case, you're only as good as your number two. Who's the guy, who's the gal behind the curtain? If you get hit by a bus, who's going to run your business? So I would say that person is probably more important than the owner themselves, because once you give someone a check, regardless of what its size, they may not have all the motivation to continue working at the same capacity. Yeah. And at the end of the day, if they decide to retire, which happens, some of them may say, I want to work for 10 years, and 2 years later, the wife's putting pressure. The kids want them to be at home. They don't need the salary or the bonus. They've got all the money in the bank. So I think that number two person is really important. What do you literally go to work tomorrow? If I get hit by a bus, does the business collapse, or is there someone that can do my job? And literally, if you were to run through that scenario, go home and talk to your wife tonight. What is she going to do? Is this business you've built, you've got all this equity potentially, and is it not worth anything without you? And if it isn't, that's not a business I'm looking to buy. If you literally are, if you're the estimator, you're the salesperson, you're everything, then the business isn't worth anything, because you are the business. And to the extent that you've got people that can do it. So I'd say the people component is probably the most important. And I would say the other one's the obvious, but it's not so obvious to everyone. Everyone wants to see consistency. So that is no different than any financial investment. Do you want to invest in real estate now where we don't know where real estate's going? I don't know where the stock market's going. I don't know where Trump's going to take this economy, literally morning to morning. Now would not be a great time, unless you're a stockbroker and this is what you do for a living. It's not what I do for a living. I would not want to invest in real estate right now or the market, because I just don't know where it's going. Same thing with a restore. I'm looking for a business that's growing, or if nothing else, it's stable. And so when you've got these ups and downs, which all of us have, that is something as a buyer I am concerned about, because am I buying it on the high? Am I buying it on the low? As a seller, they want to sell it on the high. I don't want to sell it on the high and then lose 20% of revenue because you had a one-hit wonder. You got one big job. You got one customer that is related to you or is a friend of you. And if you sell the business, they're not going to follow you. So I think the stability in revenue and profitability is really important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And there's something that people don't think about often, especially the key person. You call them the number two in command. I have some friends of mine that are in agencies as well, and I've actually had legitimate serious situations happen with some health where they woke up and wow, luckily they got on the other side of it. But that was the realization that they came to, was wow, if I went away today, their business was making millions of dollars, but if I went away today, this is gone. My wife, my kids. Everybody's out on their feet. They have no idea what's going on in the business. So he was able to, luckily by the grace of God, he was able to kind of just wake up and have that second chance to get things right. And he did. So I think that's something people don't think about often enough. So I appreciate it. So you did share a link. I want to move to RIA stuff here. The ATI Restoration is offering out there. I'm going to scroll it on the bottom. Can you talk about the valuation tool a little bit? And for everybody that's listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, check out the YouTube video. Or it's live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll have it on our website and post it everywhere. But the link is valuation.atirestoration.com if you're looking for that link to check out if you like what Jeff has to say about it.
Yeah, so the valuation tool, it's the only free valuation tool that I'm aware of. We spent a year and a half developing this. We've looked at 500 plus companies at this point. We've run all the businesses that not all of them. We ran most of them that we looked at. We definitely ran all the ones that we bought. And it takes into account revenue, profitability, consistency. Are you doing TPA work? Are you generating your own revenue? You punch that in. It shouldn't take, you don't need to be a CFO or a controller or an accountant to do this. This is very basic. It's high level. It's going to give you a range. I say it's the Zillow for a restoration contractor. So I go to my house, it's going to give me a range that could be, a 30% range, but then in the middle, it's going to have the Z estimate. So very similar to this. It's free. Reach out to me, go onto the website. We can get you a code if you need one, but we developed it. Love for people to use it. There's no take with it. Feel free to use it every month, every quarter, every year. At the end of the day, I like knowing what my house is worth. I also like knowing what my business is worth, and this is the only tool to do so.
All right, I appreciate it. Valuation.atirestoration.com. So Jeff, talk to me. You were just in my neck of the woods. We're based out of here in West Palm Beach, Florida, and at RIA. And something significant happened, I'm hearing, out there with you and your role with RIA. So first off, congratulations. I wanted you to talk a little bit about what that role means to you, and then give a little bit of background on RIA and kind of what things are moving into the future, because I'm going to hit you with a few quick hitter questions before we wrap up here to try to provide some value out there besides what we've already discussed.
Yeah, so I think so first of all, the RIA has been around for 75 years, and it is it has evolved and it has changed. We truly represent restorers of all shapes and sizes. Before I got on this call, I was listening to a friend of mine, Andy McCabe, that was on your show last time. So literally from, I'd call Serve Pro on one end of the spectrum, put Andy McCabe on the other side of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. My goal as the incoming president, I want to represent you, the industry. You may not agree with all of my opinions. At the end of the day, we are a split industry, and I would say it's no different than our political system.
Yeah.
No matter who the president is, the president wins by having 52% of the popular vote. And I would say no matter who's leading, I would say 40 to 50% of members or the industry may not be happy with where we're going. But at the end of the day, our job is to only focus in on things that impact all restorers. Yeah. So to the extent that I can impact everyone's business, I don't care if you're TPA, non-TPA, I don't care if you do PA work or you don't touch it with a 10-foot pole, or how you get your business. There is a million ways to be successful, and I can't tell you how to be successful in ways that don't resonate with me and how I was growing up in ATI. But to the extent it helps all restorers, those are the fights that we want to fight. And not everyone's going to be happy with that direction, which is totally fine. But at the end of the day, we want to bring value to the industry. So we've got an affinity program where we've got discounts and rebates with Cotality, Veris, Sunbelt, you name it. Albiware, there's literally there's 23 companies that are providing discounts to restorers. So if nothing else, by joining, you get access to those rebates. But we're actually, pardon my French, but we're doing shit. Like 10 years ago when I joined, we weren't. Like, we are making an impact. We meet with Cotality, which is the old CoreLogic. We meet with Veris. So Cotality's pricing 3 years ago, when Garrett Gray took over and they merged, the industry was really upset and said pricing was roughly 30% less than Verisk. Within the first 30 days of Garrett taking over, I met with him, Ed Cross, Jesse Herrera. They've increased labor pricing by 40% over the last 3 years.
Wow.
We meet with Verisk on a regular basis, everything on technical pricing, labor pricing by markets. We are doing things. Quite honestly, whether you're a member or not, you are a benefactor. We are increasing rates across the industry. Us as restorers are so busy, even at our size and scale, we are not very effective in submitting pricing to Verisk. But that is one of the things when we meet with leadership. There's bills out there. I don't know, Ben, if you saw the Senator Hawley last week on Capitol Hill, or if you saw
some of it. Yeah, I was sent the link from shout out to Andy and John Isaacson sent it to me, and some of the group messages that I'm in on Facebook and seeing. I haven't watched the whole entire thing, but I mean, it was nice to see. I guess from your end.
There's a lot of legislation going on, and I think that's pretty exciting. again, I think the truth with everything's somewhere in the middle. But I reached out to Senator Hawley last week on behalf of the RIA, and I've requested a meeting with leadership at the RIA and some of the larger restorers on how we can impact change. There's local bills in each state that quite honestly are crippling to a restorer. There was one in Texas that was going to require us to basically guarantee that insurance companies were going to reimburse insureds, and that we would have to submit all estimates to the government, the state of Texas. And like, there are so many bills. I mean, literally, I think we've taken on 13 bills, but like the RIA tackled this one in Texas. Thankfully, we had a restorer, American Restoration, domiciled in Dallas there. They ponied up $20,000 to hire a lobbyist within 5 days of identifying this bill. And there was a valid reason why she put the bill up. One of her neighbors got screwed over by a general contractor who was a remodeler who was doing some restoration work and basically promised the insured that you're going to get reimbursed. She was shorted like $100,000 on a house fire, and they tried to seize possession of her house. And so the senator did what she thought was right. She wasn't aware of what we're doing at the RIA, wasn't really aware of the industry. She was looking out for her homeowner that was taken advantage of by one contractor who I wouldn't even classify as a restoration contractor. But if that bill went anywhere, it would have been crippling. And there are many of those all over the country. And those are some of the things that we're doing. And one of the things I'd end with, like a NAICS code. So some people aren't familiar with SIC or NAICS code, but it's how you define an industry. So if you're an electrician, I can go onto Google or an AI bot and figure out exactly how big the electrical industry. Yeah. Go to restoration. I promise you're going to see things that say it's a $20 billion industry. I'll tell you, I think it's a $250 billion industry, or it's somewhere in between those bookends. Sure. And the reason is we don't have a dedicated SIC or NAICS code. So the government doesn't identify us as a true trade. And until we're identified as a trade, government agencies can't find us. It's hard to locate a restorer. I think we found about 20 different codes that restorers are identifying, everything from house remodelers to maintenance companies to abatement companies. Even though companies don't do asbestos, they've identified themselves as an asbestos contractor. And so that is one of the things we submitted to our government earlier this year. They only do submissions like every 5 years. We're hoping and praying that we can get the NAICS code. But those are just some of the amazing things that we're doing in the RIA to impact your business. Again, I don't care if you left ATI last week and you started your business. The things that we are doing will impact restorers of all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it sounds like you guys are moving in the right direction. I mean, that you've listened to the podcast, Andy, one of the big things is, and I'm a proponent of it, of our omnipresent marketing modalities that we use here, is getting involved in these organizations. So if you want to sit on the bleachers and kind of watch and complain, you're really not going to affect any kind of change. So really the only option is to get involved and speak up and get involved in whatever state it is. I know like a lot of stuff in Florida here, like you couldn't even, there's no way, I don't even know how you would even count how many restorers out here, because there's so many different roofing contractors. I've seen landscape companies that are irrigation companies that do drywall that are doing restoration for flood stuff. We've got calls on commercial projects as a site contractor for a water main break that's flooded a building, and we can go shut the water off and fix it outside, but we're not there. And it seems like there's a lot of gray area in that industry. So it's very refreshing to see that you guys are kind of zeroing in on this and actually getting involved with the legislation. And I guess I can't say enough. You just need to get involved. So speaking of the areas of contention and the groups here that are here, and they think, and we know you're never going to be able to make 100% of the people happy, but taking over this role now, how are you planning on bridging that gap in whether it's communication or whatever it is? Because it sounds like all the intentions are there to push the industry forward in a good way that's going to net benefit everybody that's out there that is involved in this industry. What are we doing? What is RIA doing right now? Or what's the plan, if you guys have one, to bridge that gap between these guys that are sitting on the sidelines that maybe feel like their voice is not heard right now?
Yeah, so I tell you, we've done some surveying of the industry. There's really two pain points as restorers of all sizes. First of all, it takes a lot longer to get paid than it used to. And I would say second is communication. And I would say communication goes both ways. And I'm really referring to carrier to contractor to insured communication. So
Sure.
the first one, they're both big picture. None of these are going to be solved in months, quarters, or in the next 12 months. Some of these things may take a decade to solve. They may never get solved, to be honest with you. But for payments, I'll give you one example. The RIA got involved in Canada, and we were able to put out a white paper. There was some government wordage that we found, and we put out a white paper on prompt pay. And so we found some legislature that was favorable to contractors that the restorers didn't know about. And on average in Canada, they were getting paid slower than we were here in the United States. And so
Wow.
we are getting paid in about 80 days. They were getting paid in over 80 days. We put out a white paper at the RIA. One of our board members, Frank Mirabelli with First General, one of the largest providers in Canada, came back to us and said, hey, I had a carrier that in general, and he has like 45 locations doing, big revenue.
Yeah.
And I had a particular carrier, which quite honestly controls most of the market in Canada. They were taking 110 to 120 days to pay him. We put this white paper out, and he says, Jeff, on average now, that particular carrier is paying us in 24 to 5 days. And by the way, they're bank wiring us the money, where before we would chase checks. Now, Canada, different political system.
Yes.
Don't know how effective we'll be in change, but I think if I can paint where I'd like to take us, and again, that may not be in my presidency term, that may be 5 years, 10 years, but I think all restorers, regardless of what side of the spectrum you're on, that's a win for restorers. If we can get carriers to, one, bank wire us money. Let's remove the third-party checks. Let's get rid of the mortgage companies. That is all unnecessary time. But ultimately, if we can get them to make payment, I think that's the biggest win. And I think anytime we can eliminate the insured, we can eliminate a mortgage company, that is more time and process we can reduce. And so to do that, we're working with Cotality. I'm working with Verus and some carriers to try and get in front of like mortgage associations, get in front of carrier groups. So it's advocating change, and that is a big picture. So I think that's where we're going for payment. And I think the hardest and probably the most impactful, and I think anyone who follows the Restoration Rebels, since you had Andy on your show last, as an example, is communication. And I will tell you, I've sat in meetings with the chief claims officers for some of the largest insurance carriers out there. I will tell you, their biggest issue is the same issue that we have. It's communicating with contractors. It's people not responding. It's not providing estimates. It's not communicating with the insured. And so we need to define what the best practices are. We need to, whether you're a TPA contractor or not, what is industry standard? And we've got a carrier task force led by Mark Springer out of Montana, former RIA president, who is leading our carrier task force. It's in its infancy stages. It just got kicked off and approved in Florida. But we're going to include the Cotalities of the world, the Verus. We're going to get some carriers involved. And ultimately, we want to train and educate restorers so they can better communicate with carriers. And so what is the expectation for contractors? Not everyone's going to oblige by what the RIA standard is, but what is that white glove expectation if you're an RIA contractor, and what you should and shouldn't do? Again, TPA or non-TPA. So those are big pictures. There's lots of carriers, and at the end of the day, we are a nonprofit. We only have so many volunteers. We have very limited capital. People think we have this big giant budget. We don't have millions and millions of dollars. We have basically $1 million or less a year to play around with. That doesn't go very far when you represent $40 billion in revenue amongst our members in an industry that's trillions of dollars deep, and that no matter what we want to tackle, we'll never have the budget to take on a middle market carrier, much less an entire insurance ecosystem. So how can we make that better? I think it's through legislature, but ultimately through relationships. And we have to have better dialogue with carriers. And I don't care if you're on the rebel side, you're on the doing all TPA work. At the end of the day, communicating better with carriers and figuring out what is and isn't acceptable should improve your payment process, should hopefully reduce any litigation with contractors, and ultimately improve the experience from the customer. And ultimately, that's what we're always trying to do. I think both the carrier and the contractor, we want the experience from the insured to be better than what it is right now. And we want it to be last less adversarial than what it is at times.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's really refreshing to hear this side of it and see where you guys are trying to push this industry in the future. And also appreciate that, there's no magic pill or magic button that's you're going to be able to push to solve all the problems. Taking the big picture point of view is going to be the only way that this gets going. And I agree. Communication from all fronts is huge, bringing everybody to the table, making sure people have a voice, getting involved. So speaking of getting involved in RIA, restorationindustry.org, there is a link or a URL scrolling across the bottom. If you're one of our watchers, if you're a listener, pretty easy. You could Google RIA. They're not small. You wouldn't have a problem finding them. What is coming up with RIA? Any events coming up that you'd like to speak about? Anything that we can look forward to?
Yeah, we've got, so we do regional events. It's been going on for the last 2 years. So typically we do one big conference and trade show a year. Our event next year is in April. We just had ours where you and I collaborated in Florida, but we do have 3 regional events. I think they're all in November. Off the top of my head, I don't exactly remember the dates and the locations, but I believe most are Midwest. So I think we're in Tennessee, middle of the country up to the Northeast, maybe Florida. So I think we've got 3 different locations where we're hosting events. It's a great way to, it's a more intimate. It's typically a day. Yeah. I would say it ends up being 60% local restorers and then 40% demographic of really the industry, the country. You'll get people that fly in from the last one I did, I don't know, 15 states were represented. So and you get some incredible speakers. So most of these events have anywhere from 100 to 150 people. Again, a lot easier. So like the last event we had, like Greg Pine, who runs pricing at Verisk, was there. Like you can get in front of people like Ed Cross, Mark Springer, that are really industry influencers and get some one-on-one time, or doing that at like the RIA trade show when you've got 2,000 people is a lot harder to do.
Yeah, it's difficult to catch everybody in there. So, and I know the big RIA next April is in Savannah, so we're looking forward to being out there. Savannah's a cool city, not as cool as West Palm Beach, but it is a cool city. There's a little more history, I guess, in Savannah that's still there than we have here. Jeff, I appreciate your time. Listen, everybody, if you want to learn more about ATI's valuation tool, it's valuation.atirestoration.com. If you want to learn more or get involved with the Restoration Industry Association, the RIA, you can head on over to restorationindustry.org. Jeff, any other closing thoughts or statements or anything you're excited about coming up before we close up today?
Yeah, I've got 2 things. First of all, if you're not a member of RIA, it's only $299. You can do a one-time fee, or you can literally do a reoccurring monthly fee online. So it's really easy and affordable. And I say the last thing that really ties into your business, Ben, and I'll speak as someone who's trying to figure it out myself, is claim count is down, deductibles are going up, which means the traditional means of getting jobs, and I'll speak for ATI, my business. Traditionally, we've gotten jobs from adjusters, from property managers, from TPAs, from agents. If people aren't filing claims, companies like mine aren't getting the traditional lead source. We, as a company, are finally investing in SEO, digital marketing, online presence. We really haven't done that historically, or we've quasi done that. That has not been a leading driver, like less than 1% of our revenue. Yeah. That has to change for us to be relevant in the future. And I think for those of you, especially those like where you're at, like we're based in California, Texas, I think Florida, those 3 states primarily, you need to, it's different now. So you may be in a state where you've got $1,000 deductibles have increased like 2 to 3 times over the last few years. That is not going to change given all the events and storms going on. And depending on what your state, this may or may not relate to you, but in Texas, Florida, and California, you're seeing 2 to 5% dwelling limits. And what that means is if I live in a $500,000 house and I've got a 5% deductible, I've got a big deductible. I've got a I'm insuring the first $25,000 of every claim. And by the way, ATI's average job is like $13,000 with MIT and recon. And I would say that's pretty industry norm, which means the average job, if I've got a $25,000 deductible, guess what? I'm not calling my agent. I'm going to figure out how to do it. Who am I like? I mean, Ben, you're in this business. Who am I likely to find nationally, regardless of what I'm at? Probably going to find ServPro first. Yeah. Probably going to find Service Master. And then there's going to be a bunch of other local restorers that are paying big dollars on Google. Yeah. They've got Google profiles. They are advertising online, and they may be ahead of some of the larger businesses, but I think that is the wave of the future. My business is trying to figure that out now. I think all of us need to figure that out in our local market, because I want to get those jobs. For ATI to be relevant, and for when my kids take over or work in the business, we've got to get those direct referrals. And we are still figuring that out. I know that's what you do at Ironclad, but I think as deductibles rise, and that's not going to change, we all have to. Would you hire your own freaking company? And I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't hire ATI Restoration in some of our markets when you look at our Google reviews and our Facebook reviews. Some markets we kick ass, but some offices we have 12 reviews. Like I don't go to a restaurant that has 12 reviews. So why would you hire your restoration company, even if they're 5 stars? If you only have 12 reviews, my first inkling is this company just started. I don't want to be their 13th customer. I want someone that's got hundreds of reviews.
Yes. Well, so do people that are buying businesses. Your business is much more attractive having 400 4.5 star reviews than 12 5-star reviews. I mean, you're going to increase your multiples on the paying. So I know, and I do see some, and I definitely think we've got some room for some future episodes when we talk directly how's the marketing and diversifying your lead sources. But to speak from a digital marketing perspective, things are evolving. And, we talk a lot to people who don't need it, never done. I mean, ATI is a huge testament to that. You guys have grown to this monster without even having to look at that yet. But the evolution of digital marketing, how the buyer's journey is working, besides these large deductibles, is these are all looked at as branded assets. Your position on Google, your review count, your social media profiles, these are all tangible branded assets that you can take with you or sell with you when you close the door. So if you're out there and you're in a situation like ATI's, and do a gut check, a perfect gut check. When people are saying, hey, how's my website? How am I doing on, and we're doing an audit on the site. So just go look at your competitor, Google search water damage restoration in your city, and see who's number one. Take a look at their website, take a look at their mobile website, take a look at the reviews. And if you aren't anywhere near them, there you have a mark to hit. So that's what we help people do. We're in the visibility game. We're in the branding game. Branding is becoming much more important. A company like yours, we look into the brand. Video is going to be huge coming up, but the basics, everybody out there that's listening, to just piggyback on Jeff, is you need to have that real estate on a search engine where 98% of people are going when they look for a product or service. And with these rising deductibles, there's only going to be more people there coming to those areas and looking, and your competitors are going to get those jobs. It's not very hard to beat out a Serve Pro from a digital marketing perspective. If things are done correctly, you have a unique advantage as a restorer. If you're a small company, you're in a big company. If you're in control of your corporate site, and we're talking to franchises, you have a unique opportunity to beat them quite literally easily if you just follow a consistent marketing strategy, from organic SEO to running LSA and pay-per-click strategically, and then having a good Google business profile and getting consistent reviews. I know you spoke before about consistency being one of the things that you look for in businesses. Well, from a digital marketing perspective, that is the only thing that's going to help you to grow. It's the only thing that's going to get you that visibility. So with that being said, you guys, check into the RIA. Things are changing rapidly. I know, Jeff, I mentioned in the beginning, I'm at the point now where I'm about to release my final opus of a book, the play-by-play on how to win online for restorers. Previously, it was called the No BS Guide or Bullshit Guide. I'll put an explicit tag on this episode to digital marketing for restoration contractors. This is what my agency does for our clients to get them to get more leads from the internet. The new book is, and the funny thing I say is every time I hit publish on this book, Google changes something. I think there was 5,400 algorithm updates 8 minutes after I published my first edition of this book. So the new book, I'm going to announce it right now. It's coming soon. I've got to get some industry experts to put their eyes on it and get some quotes, but it's called the Some Bullshit Guide to Internet Marketing for Restoration Contractors, because we want to be transparent. But in general terms, this is a play-by-play, step-by-step on what you can do to win online. So I'm excited to launch that out there. And if you're open to it, Jeff, I'll call you out on the episode. If you want to take a look at the manuscript and see what you think, I'd love to send it over to you.
Thanks for having me, Ben. It's been fun.
Jeff, thank you for your time. And listen, everybody, remember restorationindustry.org, valuation.atirestoration.com, or just go to atirestoration.com. Jeff has made himself available to everybody. Connect with him on LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you consume your social media or B2B media. Jeff, thank you for joining us on the Restoration Rundown. I'm sure we will be seeing you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning into this episode. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up. And yes, I spilled the beans. The new book is going to be launched here in the next few weeks. We're just putting the final tweaks on it. So look out for that. It's available on Amazon. And we'll maybe even do some giveaways here once I get the hard copy in my hands here. That's it for today's episode, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.